Watch this guy. This is Grog. Grog is about to make one of the worst best decisions in human history. No cigarette, no filter, no brand, no warning label, no doctor, no friend saying, Grog, maybe do not inhale the haunted plant. Just fire, a weird leaf, and the ancient human instinct to do something questionable on purpose. The smoke smells different. Not like wood, not like food, not like accident. Different. So Grog leans in, probably coughs, definitely stays interested. And then something happens. Pain softens, fear steps back. The head gets lighter, the moment gets bigger. Because this story begins with a plant in a fire and ends with one of the strangest habits humans ever built a civilization around. Now here's the annoying part. The oldest evidence of tobacco use does not even prove smoking. And the first smoker archaeology can actually see was probably not the first smoker who ever lived. Ancient history does this all the time. It shows up late with one surviving receipt and expects us to figure the rest out. So if we want the beginning, we have to follow a trail. Seeds in a hearth, residues in a pipe, burned plants in ritual burners, tiny fragments of chemistry scattered across thousands of years. This is not a clean story, which, frankly, is why it is worth telling. Before humans ever smoked on purpose, smoke was already everywhere. It kept insects away, it dried meat, it cured hides, it marked camp, it traveled across distance. For most of human history, people lived inside smoke long before they ever chose it. Humans did not invent inhaling smoke. They were already surrounded by it. What changed was the moment they realized some smoke did more than sting the eyes and warm the hands. Some smoke did something to you. That discovery probably did not arrive as a grand revelation. It was probably small. A leaf tossed on coals, a stem burned by accident, a smell noticed, then remembered, then repeated. Human habits usually begin that way. Not with theory, with sensation, something that calms, something that sharpens, something that numbs, something that feels important before anyone has words for why. Humans have always been very good at one thing, noticing what the world does to the body. A shocking amount of history starts with, that did something. Fire changed more than food. It changed plants. A plant that was harsh when chewed could become tolerable when burned. A plant that acted slowly in the stomach could move fast through the lungs. Smoke is quick. That matters. It reaches deep into the body in seconds. Once humans discovered that, smoke stopped being just a side effect of fire. It became a delivery system for medicine, for intoxication, for ritual. Fire was no longer just heat, it was chemistry with ambition. Now the sloppy version of this story would be Stone Age humans smoked. That sounds clear. It is not clear. It is barely useful. Different humans use different plants in different ways for different reasons. Some chewed, some sniffed, some burned plants in ceremonies without necessarily inhaling them the way a modern smoker would. And the plant most people now associate with smoking, tobacco, was native to the Americas. So the real question is not whether all ancient humans smoked. They did not all do the same anything. The real question is when humans began turning smoke into a deliberate human behavior. The oldest clear evidence of human tobacco use now reaches back about 12,300 years. At a site in present-day Utah, archaeologists found charred tobacco seeds in an ancient hearth near the end of the Ice Age. That is remarkable. It pushes human tobacco use deep into the Pleistocene. But we have to keep the distinction sharp. Tobacco use is not the same thing as tobacco smoking. Those seeds prove people were handling tobacco extremely early. They do not by themselves prove someone sat there and smoked it. Seeds are evidence. They are not a tiny signed confession. This is one of the cruel rules of ancient history. Behavior usually begins long before proof survives. People may smoke plants for centuries before the right residue lands in the right object, in the right soil, for archaeologists to test thousands of years later. So the first smoker we can prove is almost certainly not the first smoker who ever existed. Archaeology does not give us one perfect beginning. It gives us a trail, a late trail, a damaged trail, but still a trail. And that trail gets much clearer once smoke enters an object built to hold it. The earliest direct evidence for tobacco smoking in eastern North America comes much later. In northern Alabama, residue analysis found nicotine in a late archaic smoking tube dated to about 1685 to 1530 BCE. That is a very different kind of evidence, not just tobacco nearby, not just a plant in camp, tobacco in a device built for smoke. By the second millennium BCE, some humans were not merely using tobacco, they were deliberately converting it into inhaled smoke. At that point, we are no longer looking at accident. We are looking at a repeatable practice, which is historian language for this was now a real thing people did on purpose. And we should be careful what we imagine that practice looked like. A pipe is not automatically a leisure object. In many ancient contexts, it is a ritual object, a medicinal object, a social object, sometimes a diplomatic object, sometimes a sacred one. Smoke could mark a gathering, a burial, a healing act, a negotiation, a prayer, or a shift in consciousness. The first smokers were not necessarily ancient versions of modern casual smokers. They were not standing outside the cave office on break. Many were probably using smoke in moments that felt serious, charged, or spiritually dangerous. Once that principle was discovered, humans kept finding it again. In Vermont, chemical evidence from an early woodland pipe points to tobacco smoking by the first millennium BCE. In the Pacific Northwest, archaeological pipes stretch back thousands of years, and later evidence suggests tobacco was not always the only plant involved. Humans smoked other plants too: local plants, mixed plants, narcotic plants, aromatic plants, medicinal plants. And in the eastern Pamirs, chemical evidence from wooden braziers shows cannabis being burned in ritual contexts by about 500 BCE. Different peoples, different plants, different worlds, same discovery. Fire could carry a plant into the body quickly. Once humans learn a shortcut into the nervous system, they are not famous for forgetting it. Why keep doing it? Because smoke works. It is fast. The lungs learn quickly. The brain learns quickly. The group learns quickly. A sensation that arrives in seconds is easy to repeat. A repeated sensation becomes a repeated act, and a repeated act becomes culture. Smoke can calm pain, sharpen attention, deepen ceremony, mark belonging, turn a private bodily feeling into a shared social event. Once humans learned that, smoking was no longer just chemistry, it was behavior with meaning, and humans are extremely loyal to behaviors that hit immediately. Once smoking becomes tradition, it stops being only about what the plant does. It becomes about who smokes, when, with whom, before battle, during healing, at burial, in prayer, in grief, at alliance making. The smoke itself may vanish, but the pattern remains. Pipes appear again. Burners appear again. Residues appear again. What archaeology is showing us is not random curiosity. It is preserved knowledge. Knowledge about what smoke is for. For thousands of years, smoking traditions were local. Specific plants, specific peoples, specific meanings. Then colonial exchange changed everything. Tobacco moved outward from the Americas into Europe, Africa, Asia, and eventually nearly everywhere else. A plant once embedded in indigenous ritual, diplomacy, healing, and cosmology entered trade routes, empires, plantations, and mass consumption. This is one of the strangest reversals in human history. Something intimate became global, something local became industrial, something meaningful became profitable. A ritual object walked into empire and came out as a commodity. Smoking did not begin as a factory product. It began as a human experiment with fire and plants, but the modern world scaled that experiment violently. Ritual smoke becomes commodity smoke. The occasional charged act becomes a daily loop. A ceremonial plant becomes a crop. A crop becomes an industry. An industry learns how to hold attention, repeat desire, and turn a bodily response into a reliable market. By then, smoking is no longer living inside the old logic alone. It is living inside systems designed to make the habit permanent. That is a long way from grog being nosy near a fire. And yet, beneath all the modern packaging, the ancient logic never fully disappeared. Smoke still signals pause. Smoke still marks identity. Smoke still creates group belonging. Smoke still carries danger, comfort, rebellion, ritual, status, and mood. That does not make it harmless. It makes it human. The first people who discovered smoking were not trying to invent a modern health crisis. They were discovering a new use for fire, a way to let a plant cross the threshold from the outside world into the nervous system. The modern world did not invent that logic. It industrialized it. So, when did humans start smoking? Not the first time smoke entered human lungs by accident, not the first time tobacco sat near a fire. The real beginning was the moment someone understood that smoke could be chosen for relief, chosen for ritual, chosen for medicine, chosen for feeling, chosen for power, chosen for contact with something larger than ordinary life. Long before cigarettes, long before corporations, long before warning labels, humans had already discovered that fire could transform a plant into an experience. And once that discovery was made, there was no easy way to unmake it. Once humans learned that some smoke could change the mind, history was never going to stay calm about it. The first smokers were not modern smokers, but they opened the same door. A human, a fire, a plant, a breath. And for the first time, smoke meant more than warmth.